So our subtopic for today is the Battle of Breeds or Bunker Hill. We finished yesterday talking about the Second Continental Congress and the two different types of delegates that were there. Radicals led by Patrick Henry and conservatives led by John Dickinson, and we talked about the differences there. So the thing I want to emphasize again before we start is remember, in the colonies there are a large number of colonists who are remaining loyal to the king. They're loyalists, and it's really become evident when we talk about battles in the South later. Okay? But we'll talk about the Battle of Breeds or Bunker Hill. Where has everything happened so far? In Massachusetts, right? This will continue. By the time of the Battle of Breeds or Bunker Hill, Joseph Warren, our good doctor, has been named Major General of the Massachusetts Militia. So not only is he involved in this revolution, so to speak, not only is he a famous doctor, well respected, but now he becomes Major General of the Massachusetts Militia. He'll be the man calling all the shots militarily in Massachusetts from this point on. On June 16th of 1775, Warren got word that British General Gage had ordered an attack on Charleston, Massachusetts, which was a city that overlooked Boston Harbor. So on June 16, 1775, Joseph Warren had gotten the word that British General Gage had ordered an attack on the city of Charleston. It's Charlestown, actually, is how it's spelled. A city that overlooked Boston Harbor. Well, this is where things get kind of confusing, because when Warren finds out that General Gage is ordering an attack on Charleston, a city that overlooked Boston Harbor, he wanted to be prepared, so he ordered 1,000 men up Bunker Hill to dig fortifications on the hill. So when Warren got the word that British General Gage was ordering an attack on Charlestown, a city that overlooked Boston Harbor, he ordered 1,000 militiamen up to Bunker Hill and wanted them to dig fortifications. What are fortifications? What is he having them dig?
Trenches.
Kind of like trenches, something they can get behind to defend what? Charlestown, okay? Well, the men somehow got their orders mixed up, and they went up and built those fortifications on nearby Breeds Hill. And you can see the two different hills on the handout I gave you. So they actually built the fortifications on the wrong hill than they were ordered to build it on to start this thing out. Well, I'll just preface this. The British forces were all stationed in Boston Harbor. That's where they were at. So Breeds Hill was actually closer to Boston Harbor than Bunker Hill. So what those men did is they accidentally put fortifications up closer to the British forces than Warren wanted them. He wanted to build the fortification up Breeds Hill, and they actually put them on, Bunker Hill, and they put them on Breeds Hill. Now, because Breeds Hill was so close to where the British were stationed in the harbor, how did the British look at this? How'd they view it? An act of aggression. Okay? So because of the proximity of the militia to where the British were stationed in Boston Harbor, they saw this as a threat, that the colonists were threatening the British in Boston Harbor. That wasn't Warren's intention, right? Because he wanted the fortifications built up on Breeds Hill, Bunker Hill. He wanted a more defensive positioning up on Bunker Hill. They accidentally put it on Breeds Hill, which made it a lot closer to the British fleet. Well, as a result of that act of aggression, what did the British do? Attacked. Very good. They responded. And on the dawn of June 17th, 1775, British redcoats landed their forces at Charlestown, and by early afternoon they burnt the city to the ground. Okay? So, the next day, on the morning of June 17th at dawn, the British redcoats landed their forces at Charlestown. So the rumor was true, was it not, that Warren had gotten? And by early afternoon they had sieged that town, and by early afternoon they had burned it to the ground. So on June 17th, 1775, the British redcoats landed their forces at Charlestown, and by the early afternoon they had burned it to the ground. Now where are they going? Where are the British going now? Right up Breed's Hill to take care of this colonial militia. And as the redcoats approached the American militia, as they marched towards Breed's Hill, the Americans were given orders to hold their fire until the British soldiers were within 50 yards of them. So even though that was probably difficult to do, as they watched several hundred soldiers march toward them, towards Breed's Hill, Patriot leaders told their militia members, hold your fire until they get within 50 yards, and then they would give the order to shoot. So as these guys are marching toward them, it'd be pretty hard to wait till they got 50 yards away. 50 yards isn't very far. Okay? Now, as soon as they get within 50 yards, the order is given. The American militia fires at the redcoats, and it forces the redcoats down Breed's Hill to regroup. So they're marching up Breed's Hill. They get within 50 yards. The American militia fires, obviously hits and injures and kills several, and the British then go down to the bottom of the hill and regroup. So really in history, the Battle of Bunker Hill becomes the first full-scale battle. First full-scale battle of the American Revolution, and the bloodiest. So the Battle of Bunker Hill now becomes the first full-scale battle of the American Revolution, and will turn out to be the bloodiest thus far. So, how are we doing so far? Doing pretty good. The problem is, our gunpowder is running out fast. So when these guys regroup and head back up the hill, what's going to happen? We're going to be in a little bit of trouble. Okay, we're not going to be as good a shape. Now, I always try to tell you kids a little bit in this class about people that nobody else probably knows about. And among the colonial fighters on Breed's Hill was little-known Salem Poor. Little-known Salem Poor. I believe he's on your ID sheet. Is he not? Yeah. Salem Poor is one of the colonial fighters on Breed's Hill. Now the significance of Salem Poor is he was a former New England slave. Who bought his freedom in 1769 for 27 British pounds. So, one of the colonial patriots or militia on Breed's Hill was little-known Salem Poor. He was a former New England slave, and in 1769 he had bought his freedom for 27 pounds. Now when things are looking a little bleak, Poor stands up in battle and yells, "Stand your ground. If they want blood, let's show them their own." So he was an inspiration there. So Salem Poor, when things were getting tough, when the British made their second wave, he stands up during battle and yells, "Stand your ground. If they want blood, let's show them their own." Stand your ground. If they want blood, let's show them their own. By the way, Salem Poor is one of approximately 100 African Americans that are fighting in this battle, the Battle of Bunker or Breed's Hill. He's one of about 100 African Americans at the battle. Well, who's leading the American defenses of Bunker Hill? Who's the man up front? What? Joseph Warren. So leading the American defense of Bunker Hill is Major General Joseph Warren. And he was quoted as saying, "I hope I shall die up to my knees in blood." He's inspired his troops by making the comment, "I hope I shall die up to my knees in blood." Now picture this in your mind, okay? Picture this. The first wave of the British heading up Breed's Hill, which is in front of Bunker Hill, so we're kind of defending both areas, really, aren't we? So the first wave goes up. Joseph Warren says, wait until they get within 50 yards before you fire. They get within 50 yards, he orders them to fire, several redcoats fall, and they go back down the hill to regroup, and here they come again. And during those first two assaults, Major General Warren helps the militia hold the line, rallies them, stand your ground, stand your ground. Okay? He's up there leading the charge. Stand your ground. So the first two waves, or the first two assaults, they're doing pretty well. So what happens after the second assault? They go back down the hill and regroup again, and they prepare for a third. This is the British soldiers. So they've been up the hill once, been down the hill to regroup, been up the hill once, are back down the hill regrouping as Warren is rallying his troops to hold the line. Finally, the third assault basically overwhelms Warren and his men. Hundreds of British soldiers come across those defense lines at the top of the hill, those fortifications they dug. Okay, hundreds of soldiers are coming up now. So they've made a good try the first two, but the third one they can't hold the line. And they're forced to, the Americans, retreat. And as they are being swarmed by Patriot defenses and their gunpowder running out, they choose to retreat. Who doesn't retreat and make sure all of the men are basically safe to retreat? Warren. Unfortunately for the Americans, he is shot and killed at this battle and becomes a martyr for independence. So Dr. Joseph Warren, Major General Joseph Warren, loses his life in the Battle of Bunker or Breed's Hill and becomes a martyr for independence. Well, when the smoke cleared that ended the Battle of Bunker Hill, 115 Americans, including Warren, were killed. 115 American patriots, including Joseph Warren, were killed. Anybody want to guess how many British soldiers were killed in that assault as they marched up the hill 3 times into Patriot gunpowder?
57.
1,054 British soldiers were killed in the Battle of Bunker Hill as they continued their assault up the hill 3 times. 1,054 British soldiers were killed. That was quite a statistic, but not as much as this. More than 1/2 of the British forces that fought at Bunker Hill were either killed or wounded. Over 1/2 of the total British forces that fought at the Battle of Bunker Hill were either killed or wounded. Guess who was one of the British casualties? Look back in your notes, see if you can figure it out. What? No, look back.
Oh no,
Wait.
it was the John Pitcairn.
John Pitcairn, the leader of the British forces that met Parker and his 77 militia outside Lexington, and they both tried to avoid a fight there. So, during the Battle of Bunker Hill, British casualties included Major John Pitcairn. He was the guy that led the militia's blockade of, he led British forces against the militia's blockade of Concord outside of Lexington, remember? We talked about that. 2 days after the Battle of Bunker Hill, who becomes Commander-in-Chief of America's new Continental Army? George Washington. So from this point on, the Americans are going to fight in two different fashions: as a organized Continental Army and as individual colonial militias. Okay, you'll hear more about that. So, 2 days after George Washington became Commander-in-Chief of America's new Continental Army, 2 days after the battle, he did become Commander of America's Continental Army. And from this point on, we're going to have two fashions of colonial rebellion. We're going to have an established Continental Army led by George Washington, where soldiers are going to be signing up for year enlistments, and we're also going to use the militia as well. Now, what I like about, and this is very hard to do, but you've taken notes pretty diligently, now I'm going to go back and show you a video called Patriots Rising. And there's 3 parts to this that will take us from where we started with moving towards independence, the struggle for independence, and eventually the American Revolution, and they'll take you all the way through, and we'll let you see Samuel Whittemore today. You'll get a chance to see the man. Now, here's what I want you to do, though, and I want you to be prepared to do this each time. I want you to have your notes in front of me. I want you to go back in your notes to moving towards independence, because some of this will be covered in moving towards independence, and just make sure you're picking this stuff up so you have an idea what we're doing here. Because the video there'll be things on the video on your test.